for coming to CGN Live's College Kickoff for the class of 2024. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Tonight's format will be an interactive Q&A. We've assembled a panel of experts to help you get your college search off to a strong start. To submit your questions, just hit the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom display anytime. All students and their families should have access to trusted, high-quality college and career information. That's what CGN School offers. CGN School is the first video library for counselors to build capacity with their families, featuring only nationally recognized college and career experts. Content is organized into multiple curated formats, including our new 18-month roadmap to college, delivering you the insight and tips you need when you need them. We've dropped a link to a brief video in the chat. See and hear directly from counselors who are now letting good content do more of the work. Go to collegeguidancenetwork.com to request a demo. Tonight's episode will be posted to share with your friends and colleagues later this week with caption translations in several languages. And we'd love to get your feedback about this episode later in a brief survey. By filling out the survey, you'll have the chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card. Thanks again for joining us, and here's your host, Brennan Barnard.
Welcome, class of 2024, and all of your supporters. I am your host, Brennan Barnard, and I'm excited you could join us this evening, or afternoon, or morning, depending where you are. We had tons of people register from all over the U.S. and all over the world. And, actually, please go into the chat and share where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear, where people are coming and from, and you can share it with all the attendees. That'd be great. So, juniors, I hope you are excited about what lies ahead. Not only this evening with this dream team of college admission leaders we have lined up for you, but also beyond and beyond tonight, because this is an exciting time. It's an exciting time of opportunity, of exploration. And as one of my, I'm going to get a little philosophical with you, because as one of my mentors in college counseling, Susan Tree, used to quote Aristotle. And the quote is, "Well begun is half done." And so if you stick with that philosophy, you're in a good place tonight. And I want to introduce you to our panelists, our guests. And while I do, I'm going to offer a little quiz for you. So this is the audience participation part of the show here. And we'd like you to put your answers in the chat. There are no prizes. You're also not being graded, so you can rest assured. And the only prize is actually your pride in getting the right answer. So the first question I'm going to ask is, how many colleges and universities are in the U.S.? So go in the chat there and share it. And while you do, I want to introduce Zach Evans, who is the Director of Undergraduate Admission at the University of Chicago. And Zach is in his 10th year at the University of Chicago, which is also where he got his bachelor's and master's degree. So welcome, Zach.
Happy to be here. Good to see nice to be with everybody.
It's great to have you. All right, and now your answer. There's a whole range of answers coming through in the chat there. And there you have it on your screen, 4,360. That was the count as of the beginning of the show. So hopefully none have dropped off. And you can see the divide there between four-year colleges, just over 2,800 and just over 1,500 or 2-year. So next question is, what is the average admit rate of all four-year colleges and universities? There it is on your screen. And while you ponder that, I want to introduce you, to Michael Keaton, who is the Vice President for Enrollment Management at Ursinus College. And in addition to working at places like Drexel and Northeastern and Wentworth, Michael worked on this side of the desk, and actually where I first met him when we were both working at Philadelphia schools. He was the co-director of college counseling at Friends Central in Pennsylvania. So welcome, Michael.
Welcome, friends. Great to be here with you all. And I think, Brennan, we may have actually met when I was at Haverford College and you were at Westtown.
That's right. Before you switched over. That's right. So thanks for being here. All right. So now your answer to that question. the average admit rate is 68% of all four-year colleges and universities. So the majority of schools take 2/3 of all their applicants. Just sit with that for a little bit. All right, next question. What percentage of colleges and universities admit less than a quarter of their applicants, less than 25% of all their applicants? And finally, I'd like to introduce Lisa Przekop, who is the director at the Office of Admission at University of California, Santa Barbara. And Lisa, like Zach, is a employee of her alma mater at UCSB. And she has founded a great program called the UCSB Guardian Scholars Program. So you have to look that up. There's a bunch of great guesses here in the chat. 15% of all schools. The average or the number of schools is around 75 or 2% of all colleges and universities. All four-year colleges and universities are have an admit rate of less than 25%. So it just goes to show there are a lot of opportunities, as I said at the outset. And we are going to have plenty of time for your questions. So please use the Q&A function on your Zoom display to enter your questions. You can go in there and enter them now. But as you do, first we've asked each of our experts to dive into one aspect of the college admission process and to kind of set the stage and the landscape of college admission. And we're going to queue up Zach first, but we're going to start with a poll first. And that is, what percentage of four-year colleges and universities are test optional? Do not require tests. There it is. So you can take the poll. And while you're doing that, see if we can get the results. All right, I'm gonna spoil the answer. It was 80%. There you go. So Zach, let's see how people did. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's pretty evenly split. A lot of people thought it was 40 or 60%. It is actually 80%. So, Zach, there's no topic that gets more questions in these programs than testing, as you can imagine. Can you just kind of get us started on the current state of standardized testing and admission?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I think I want to dive into a little bit of just the different types of testing policies that you're going to encounter out there. Provide a little bit of background context of why these processes differ and exist. And hopefully dispel a few of the myths that are out there. I know some of you might ask some questions. Maybe I can get ahead of them here. And certainly it's nice to start with that stat of just how many schools are already test optional. We already did the quiz earlier where you heard how many schools are just in the United States. And so just a few definitions first, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper. But certainly test optional is where I'll focus and kind of is the big elephant in the room in terms of new policies, or not new, but at least policies that have been expanding in many schools. And that's where you can submit an ACT or SAT or not. So it's pretty straightforward there. But you also see some schools that have some different policies like test flexible. Not a whole lot of schools there, but that way might be where you're not submitting an ACT or SAT, but some other type of exam. Test free is something else that you'll encounter out there, or test blind as some call it. This is going to be about 84 schools, so not nearly as many as are test optional. And then there's, of course, testing required. And so there's still many colleges and universities that might still require testing. So even though we heard that number earlier, there's a lot of test optional schools. Some colleges are still asking for it. In terms of test optional numbers, we heard the percentage. The number I saw in terms of the actual number of schools was 1,750 who are test optional. And prior to the pandemic, this was about 1,050 schools. So what a dramatic increase in the number of schools that are offering this option for students. Again, out of the over 4,000 institutions of higher education. And this, of course, includes a wide variety of institutions. So public and private, you're looking at big, small, urban, rural, all levels of selectivity in terms of who's looking to admit students with or without testing. And it's not new. It's something that's getting talked about a lot now, but over the years, it's come up as a major topic of conversation starting back in 1969 when Bowdoin College was the first school to go test optional. And there are some other schools, Bates, for instance, both of these schools in Maine, who've done some great research on just what these policies mean. And so why are schools going test optional? I'd say there's two main reasons. The big one to focus on is why this all started in the first place, which is thinking about ways to make the admissions process more fair, to look towards students who may not have been well represented in testing in terms of their academic ability, looking especially at underrepresented students on college campuses, first generation to college, or low income students. Because as we've looked at research, testing is often, testing and scores are also correlated to things like wealth, school background, and certainly some of those are tied to the level of preparation students might have access to. And so those types of conversations have been going on for a long time, and it's why so many schools have gone test optional. And then a few years ago, with the pandemic starting and testing centers closing down, all of a sudden, students couldn't take a test, couldn't submit a test. And so many colleges and universities jumped right into going test optional to make sure students could still apply to college and show us what they can do. And additionally, research shows us that a high school transcript is one of the best indicators of potential success in college. So that's looking at the level of rigor and how you're taking advantage of what's available to you in your high school setting. Another piece of data I wanted to throw out there is there's the question of how many schools are test optional, but how many students are actually submitting tests. And what I found is the Common Application, for instance, which has about 1,000 member colleges and universities. Last year, they saw that only 43% of students were submitting a test score to a college or university. And students were being selective in where they chose to submit those scores, maybe applying to several schools, submitting to some and not to others, maybe based on the score they had, and of course, averages they're seeing at colleges. And so this is going to vary from college to college, though. There are still some universities that might see 70% of their applicant pool still submitting test scores, and others that are going to see less than half. And of course, for those universities that are test-free, you can try to throw your test score at them and they won't take it. That's what their process is all about. So a couple things to end on as I think through the test optional framework and landscape are some of these myths that are out there. The first one that I see is, if I don't submit testing, does the college assume that I just have a low score? And that's not the way that this works. Without testing, the onus is then on the college to make a fair evaluation of your academic preparation using your transcript, GPA, class rank if it's offered, level of rigor, and other information that we can glean from things like your high school profile and secondary school report. And so the test score with the test optional process is removed from the conversation, from the review. Another one that I sometimes hear is, well, I have a better chance of getting in if I submit my test score. Now, while I can't speak for every school, I can definitely say this should not be the case. I'll be the first to say that the college admissions process. I don't know if I'm getting some feedback here. Are you guys here?
A bit, yeah.
Okay, we'll work through it. But I'll be one of the first to tell you the college admissions process may not be perfect, but we're doing our best to make sure that we're considering students on a level playing field, especially when it comes to something that is as sensitive as academic preparation, whether it's with testing or without. And then I think a third major one that I would point to with the number of schools, especially that are test optional now or test free, is the idea that, well, I don't need to take an ACT or SAT anymore. And I think you might find some different answers from different colleges or admissions counselors. My personal view on this is that there are still some schools that require testing. Some schools' ability to take a test or not is dependent on the state legislature. And some schools have decided to require testing after taking a few years off with the pandemic. And so you don't know how things might change, but my advice is to take an ACT or SAT potentially. That way you have it in hand. And then you can do research on colleges, their averages, and make the decision on whether or not you'd like to submit your score. At the end of the day, my love of the test optional policy is that it puts more power in a student's hand to choose how they represent themselves on the college application. So that's a little bit of the test optional piece. I imagine my colleagues might have more great wisdom to impart on that topic, and we might get some questions, but I'll leave it there so we can continue going forward.
Thank you so much. And we certainly did get a lot of questions as you were speaking, and you addressed a lot of them, and we'll kind of loop back around to some of the others as you definitely sparked some conversation there. Mike, I want to turn to you next. And could you talk? There's kind of a growing divide, right, between selective college admission and everyone else, right? Less selective schools. Can you explain kind of how that came to be, and why it's important to understand that divide?
Yes, absolutely. I think I need unmuting. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
You're now muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
You're
Okay.
good. All right.
I think there's internal and external forces that I think are responsible for this growing divide. Internal meaning conversations and forces that have to do with the world of college admissions and college counseling, and external, the number one place that I point to is the oversaturation of media coverage in college admissions that focuses on such a small handful of ultra selective colleges. When you look at newspaper or other coverage of college admissions, the narrative has always been throughout my 25-year career, every year when decisions are about to release, it's about how hard it is to get into college now. Places are so much more selective, even though we've already heard that there's such a small, not even just a small percentage, but such a small number of schools that admit less than 25% of their applicants. But when you hear media coverage about admissions, it seems like that is the only story. We also heard about the admit rate being about 68% for four-year colleges. So the reality is that most colleges accept most applicants, but also it's important to point out that most people who go to college go to those schools that accept most applicants. And there's a lot of great things going on there. Also important to note that I think something that is sometimes lost on those of us that work in college admissions or in college counseling, that even in today's world, most Americans still don't go to college. In 2021, about 38% of adults 25 and older had a bachelor's degree from anywhere. So even now, where there are more folks going to college, the overwhelming majority of Americans do not have a four-year degree from anywhere. So when we talk about things like exclusivity or prestige or being in a certain category, just by having a college degree puts folks in a different category of privilege that most Americans even now have not been able to achieve well into adulthood at the age of 25. And internally, I think college admissions and college counseling folks are really good at saying the right thing and talking about this process and saying that the college search process should be about fit, students finding the best places that are the best fit for them. And you will hear folks say that over and over and over again. And it's not necessarily that I think folks don't believe it. There's lots of great folks in admissions and college counseling, and I'm very proud to be in this world. But I also know that if I'm realistic and take a look back, I see that even though people always say that it's about fit, we also see over and over again, folks are really quick to celebrate and elevate success stories that are tied into those uber selective colleges and universities, more than they do those success stories that are tied to institutions that have a much more inclusive admit rate. So I'm not somebody who's above being opinionated. I have lots of opinions on lots of things, and I don't think that students and parents, when they're engaged in the search process, they should be opinionated as well as they investigate colleges and universities. There's a lot out there, right? And they're trying to find not just one, but several places to apply to. They're going to only end up at one, but they're trying to find several places that are going to be a really good match. So they should ask questions and have opinions and be somewhat discriminatory. But I think the key is developing their own set of criteria, finding their own set of questions to ask, and evaluating those places on what is the best for them. There is no inherently best college or best university or even 10 or 20 or 30 best schools. There's a lot of great things going on at a lot of places, whether they be flagship public universities, small liberal arts colleges, highly selective private schools, or inclusive admit rate schools. So it's just really important and incumbent for students to have the best experience, to listen to folks and do some research, but also tune out a lot of the noise and focus and hone in on finding those places that are going to be the best fit for them. And sometimes that's really hard, again, because there is so much focus and attention on those very small handful of colleges. And that's something that is contributing to more applications at some of those places, but also some folks ignoring some of the schools that maybe don't get the press, don't get the publicity, don't have the prestige, but are doing really great things and providing really transformational experiences for their students.
I really appreciate that. And it's a good segue, because it's what exactly I want to ask Lisa about next. And it's that noise, right? So let's talk a little bit about transparency, Lisa. I mean, how can students and their supporters kind of cut through that noise and interpret what they're hearing from colleges and universities as they market themselves and things like that?
Yeah, Mike brought up so many great points. I could touch on a lot of them, but what I think a student and parent need to understand is that you are the consumer, and you have a lot of tools available to you these days that allow you to do the research, to find that best fit. Colleges understand that you're probably looking at a lot of schools, that you are probably hearing from a lot of schools. And at the same time, we are very much actively wanting to get on your radar. So sometimes a student will tell me, Mike, I've started getting emails from you and I don't even know how you got my information. Or, does this mean that I have a good chance of getting admitted because you've started to write to me? So let me tell you very quickly a little bit about what goes on with colleges. All colleges, no matter how selective, the most selective to those that are wide open, are looking to fill their seats with a variety of students. We don't want all of our students to be the same, because so much of what you're going to learn in college is from the people around you, not just the professors who are teaching, but your peers in the classroom. So we want to fill our classes with students from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, in California, different regions of the state of California. So I'm looking at geography. I'm looking at your academic interests. I have some departments that get a lot of applications and some departments that don't get quite as many. So I might also be searching for students who have interest in different academic backgrounds, or maybe some of our student organizations or our athletic teams. There are a lot of spaces to fill, and we want as large a variety of students as possible. So how do we find you? Well, if you took a PSAT exam, we may have purchased your name to include in our search lists. If you attended a college fair and filled out an intake form or let us scan, your badge, we are going to add you to our mailing list. It may be that you sent us a question and we kept your email address and put you on our prospect list. It may be that your parent did that and you didn't even know that your parent signed you up for a mailing list. A lot of different ways that we find your information. If you're using search tools on the internet, whether it be, the College Board search tools or niche, or a lot of different search tools out there, you may have given them permission to release your information. So our goal is to collect as many of those names as possible. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're an automatically going to be admitted to us. What it means is we would really love to engage in a conversation with you. Let's start that conversation. Ask us questions. Let us send you information. Let us send you websites we think might be of interest. We're engaging in a conversation. It may mean that you are within that selective range of students that might be a strong applicant to our campus, or it may be that you wrote to us seeking additional information. So your job is to decide which of those, tools you want to use to research colleges. The University of California, I'll give you an example, is a test-free university system, meaning even if you send us your test scores, we will not use them as part of our selection process. But if you took an exam, as I mentioned, PSAT, SAT, ACT, we may seek out your contact information because we think we have some information about our campus you might want to learn. So really the information you're receiving from colleges puts the power in your hand. We're giving you links and websites that we know prospective students show the most interest in, but we're putting the power in your hands to explore and do research. You can choose to not follow that website. You can choose to unsubscribe and not receive those emails. The power is in your hands. So please don't feel overwhelmed by the information. View it as an invitation to engage. The last thing I'm going to say is that there are some colleges that use something called demonstrated interest, meaning the more engaged you are with that college in terms of responding to emails, clicking on links, they might track that information and say, wow, this person is really engaged in our emails. They must be super interested in my college. That might be a sign for that college that you're a student they want to pursue a little bit harder because you seem to really be drawn to their university. And they might look at that at the time they review applications. It's perfectly okay to ask a college, do you use demonstrated interest in your selection process? Because of what I would tell you as a public institution, University of California, we don't look at that at all. So clicking on lots of links for me doesn't mean you're more likely to get admitted. It just means that I'm really happy that you're engaging in that conversation that we want to have with you. So don't get overly ambitious and sign up for every single mailing list you ever see, because you will get a lot of emails from colleges and you will get a lot of brochures. But if you're a student that really wants to explore every option, then absolutely sign up, engage, involve yourself in those discussions. Try not to let yourself get overwhelmed by it all. Use it as a sign that colleges found something about you interested and would like to chat with you more.
Well, and I think that's really important because I think the take-home message, right, is that this is not a passive experience, right? You really need to lean in, and part of that's kind of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of the questions you want to have answered, and not just what is being fed to you, but really kind of being discerning, right, and being active.
Absolutely.
And so you talked about being overwhelmed, and Zach, maybe I'll turn to you with a question that came in from Miles. That every year the admission process seems to get more competitive, and Miles asked, how can we manage our stress levels around this? Student mental health is at an all-time high, and in terms of being a serious issue on high school and college campuses. So how do students manage that stress?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and such an important topic, especially given what we heard already as we think about just, I guess, the small number of schools with those lower admit rates that get a little bit of more attention than I think they need to be getting, which then is causing the cycle of maybe applying to more schools, raising application numbers, and so on. But I think there's a couple things that you have the power to do as a student and a potential applicant to any school, is to understand that you have power in your hands in building that college list to start with, and starting early. And so there are a couple things you can do really early on in your college search, and that's really, keep notes. Some people have a college journal, or they use a spreadsheet to keep track of deadlines or things like that. So staying organized and starting early is such a great way to stave off some of that stress that may come down the line. There are a lot of colleges out there that use applications that you can send out to multiple schools, Common Application, SCORE, university systems, and things like that. And so if you're doing that, that simplifies part of the process, but you'll find a number of colleges might ask for extra questions or supplemental essays. And so if your college list grows too long and you have a bunch of schools with these extra essays, you're adding stress to yourself that I don't think you need to. Because my advice is be selective in the front end. Keep your list manageable in terms of how long it is. That's going to be a great starter. Start earlier with your research, and trim colleges if you don't think they're going to be a good fit for you. And then make sure that you're doing things like keeping track of those deadlines in a place that makes sense for you. And for any of the essays, whether it's that personal statement that a lot of colleges are asking for, or even some of those supplemental essays, the summer before your senior year, if you've got a little bit of time to start writing out some drafts or working on those things before you start your senior year classes, like a lot of that is really just about time management. That's going to ease some of that stress, I think.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, the back to the quote, right? Well begun is half done. So if you start now and you kind of ease into it and you research and everything like that, you shouldn't have to get to the point where you're applying to 20, 30 schools, right? You do your homework and figure it out on the front end, like you said. Mike, there's a question here from Adya about we talk about a lot about fit and match and finding your match and what are important things to look at and look for when you're determining fit or match in a school for a student kind of starting out in this?
Sure. So one of the things about college admissions that is so tough is the answer is it often depends. And so I think that there is no one definition of fit that's going to be 100% applicable to every student. But a few things that I think students should keep in mind. First of all, academic fit. If you have an idea of a certain academic program that you're interested in, does the colleges and universities that you're looking at, do they have that program? How is it taught? Is it a good match for your learning style? Location obviously is important, and we're talking about a lot of the times residential colleges, right? So not everyone is going to have a residential college experience, but many students are. So they're also looking for fit in terms of culture and environment and having a new home where they live on campus. So if you're someone who needs to be in a big city and you're looking at a program that is in a rural area that seems like the absolute perfect fit academically, but it's in an area that's not going to work for you living there, then it's not the perfect program. So culture, location, surrounding, financials. The financial fit is a huge part of fit. It would be great if in a vacuum, everyone could just go where they were able to gain admission and didn't have to worry about affordability, but that's not the way the world works. And so finding a place that is a good fit and a reasonable fit for one's financial situation is also something that's really crucial, critical, and important. And I believe that students should take that into consideration when cultivating their college list. I think it's also important to never eliminate schools right off the bat because they think that they may not be able to afford them, because oftentimes one does not know how much a school is going to cost until they've been admitted, and applied for and received financial aid and merit scholarships if they're in play. But making sure that there's a range of options that may work for one's financial situation, I think, is also a very important part of fit.
Yeah, there are so many different aspects to fit. So I think that's really important to think about. That the question that came in, Lisa, I'm going to point to you, is about transferring. And the question is, for students who are looking to attend a 2-year community college, is there advice you can provide on how to successfully transition to a 4-year college after they achieve their associates?
You know, I'm glad you asked me that question because I am a transfer student. And I think, you know, that for a lot of students, it can be a really great option. My college degree says University of California. I had great preparation at a community college. I believe the key to success is to go into it with a very finite plan, right? My goal is in 2 years to transfer to this institution, or these are the lists of institutions, and I'm going to do that in 2 years. Because I think it's very easy if you go, say, to a community college and maybe you have a part-time job on the side to say, well, you know what, I'm making good money at that part-time job. Maybe I will take fewer classes and transfer after 2.5 years or 3 years. So I believe you need to go in as early as possible with that plan that this is going to be a 2-year journey for me, or maybe 3, depending on some majors. I think the best thing you can do while you're in high school, if the transfer path might be for you, is to really try to narrow down, are you a STEM student or does that not matter to you? Because while you're at the community college, you need to be working on what we term preparation for your major, right? So if I am going to transfer as a biology major to UCLA, I should be taking the same types of courses that a freshman and sophomore at UCLA is currently taking. There's a term called articulation, which is basically a list that a lot of colleges have of these are the courses you should be taking in order to transfer to our university in X major and enter at the same level as a student who started as a freshman here. So for instance, I was able to say, I want to transfer to UC Santa Barbara in 2 years as a psychology major. What are the list of courses that I should be working on now? The number one reason a transfer student is denied is typically because they have not completed the necessary major preparation. And a lot of times that involves taking the right math course and definitely taking the freshman English series that most universities are going to ask for. So I usually recommend students take math right away, their very first semester at a community college, if they are going to pursue a major that requires math. And a lot of systems like University of California require all students, regardless of their major, to have a transferable math course. It may be that you satisfied that in high school, but there's a good chance you may need to take it at the community college. So seek advising before you even register for your first classes so you can get right on track. It's a great option. And, you know, you can develop student leadership skills at the community college. So don't feel like you're going to be left out of campus life just because you might not necessarily be living in a residence hall.
That's great advice. Thanks. And right, seek out the transfer coordinator early on and like you said, put a plan together. That's really helpful. So, Zach, I want to turn to you. There's a question that came in from Ed about what students should ask the admission office during a college visit. What are some good questions that you've gotten or that you would suggest people ask?
Yeah, you know, I think there's certainly plenty of things you can be doing when you visit a college campus. And the first thing I would also tell you is don't limit yourself to just what the admissions office is offering in terms of a tour and information session. I think some of our visitors get the best experience, and I've heard anecdotally that they have amazing experience when they're talking to kind of random people on campus. See how friendly people are and ask them questions about student life. I think that there's specificity is helpful. As you think about the questions you ask an admissions officer of kind of like, how's the history department? We're rarely ever going to say bad. You might get a response like, it's great, we cover all the centuries, something like that. But I think being specific, if you're going to put the time and energy into traveling to a college campus, whether it's down the street or you are paying for a flight and hotel to visit colleges and universities, that's a considerable investment. So, doing some of that front end research to know these are the departments I'm interested in. These are the questions that I can't seem to find on the website. I think those are the best questions we get, are the ones where, we know that it's not an easy ask. That's maybe not as specific, but as I think about good questions, are often departmentally focused. They dive deeper than kind of what deeper into our curriculum. I think that's a big part for us is we like to think we do some things that are pretty unique. And so I think it's helpful for the student to say, well, I know I've done some research on your school, but I want to know a little bit more in depth about this specific program or this aspect of student life. And then make sure you're talking to if your tour guide sticks around for a few minutes after the tour, talk to the current students. I really think that's something, and ask them, what they know about the specific things that you're interested in. And don't be afraid to ask tough questions. We love tough questions. We train our staff to handle tough questions. So if you've heard something about a university that you're unsure of, or makes you question whether it's the right fit, like, call us out on it. And trust me, we want to give you the answer that's going to help dispel whatever that concern might be.
Yeah, I mean, be persistent, right? I mean, if you need to get the answers to the questions, because you really are kind of the consumer at this point, right? And so be persistent, and also I recommend to students that they ask the same question to multiple people on a college campus, right? Ask a student, ask a staff member, ask a faculty member, and look for kind of triangulation, right? Look for are people in the community all saying the same thing, or is it really divergent? Because I think you can get a good sense of the story that the school is trying to tell. So Mike, I want to come back to testing for a minute, because there's just a ton of questions about it. And there's some questions about, is there a downside? What's the downside for not submitting tests if it's a test optional school? What are the advantages or disadvantages of doing that?
I think so. This is another one of those, it depends. But as far as, because different schools have different policies, but I believe, and I think Zach said it earlier, referring to test optional, that when places say they're test optional, it really is, it's an option. You have the option to submit the scores if you think that they're a good representation of you as a student, and if not, you don't need to. And there's other things that colleges and universities use to evaluate applicants, and most places, at least in my experience, even when they aren't test optional and scores are a part of it, they're still looking at, most importantly, the high school transcript. That's one of the things I think most admission folks agree on, that the high school transcript is always the most important piece, because it shows us what you've done as a student throughout a length of time, at least 3 full years completed, and maybe more than that, depending upon when and how you apply. And even if we don't have any grades for your senior year, we'll have the courses that you've signed up to take. So that gives us a lot more data about who you are as a student than a standardized test that takes a few hours to take. I am of the opinion that in this landscape right now, that if students don't want to take an exam, for many students, and I saw this when I was on the high school side, advising students to applying to a variety of different places. For many students, there was a lot of anxiety around taking tests, or there was the money and other barriers to taking tests over and over again in order to get a certain score that they wanted to do, and even just the timing into it. That was something that you had to factor in a schedule of test taking into your college search process. And there's so many places that are test optional, at least right now at the moment, that you don't have to do that. So I think it's completely fine for students to ask the conversation, number one, whether or not they even want to take a standardized test, SAT or ACT. And I think that's a great advantage, because if you don't have to do it, whereas in the past, there was a situation where for the most part, you really did need to try to take an exam at least once, if not more times. So now students have the advantage of having more time to devote to other things if they decide not to go down that path. And as far as figuring out when or when not to submit a test, I think that it's always great to look at those test optional schools, look at what they're reporting as an average test score or a mid 50% test score, and see how your exam matches up with that. Taking a look at how your transcript, grades, and curriculum, how they may match up, and make a decision from there. So if you're in the mix, you may want to consider it. If it's lower than the middle 50%, then it may be a case where you do not want to take the exam. But it's going to be different for different places. But I think the main advantage right now is that there is a big barrier that has been removed, because there's so many different colleges and universities of all different sizes, selectivities, locations, academic focuses that are test optional. So I think that's the big advantage for students, is that there's so much more access to so many more places than there was certainly when I started college admissions in the late 90s.
Absolutely. And you highlight an important point, right? That students can potentially open up a lot of time to do other things, and to invest themselves in other places when they're not having to worry as much about testing, if that's not something that they
Absolutely.
have to stick with. And so and Lisa, maybe you can talk a little bit about, there are a bunch of questions about extracurriculars, and does a student need to have some of the things that students involved in, maybe they haven't done it like a national level or won awards for. And there's another question about kind of what counts as an extracurricular. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at involvement?
Yeah, definitely. I think the best thing you can do for yourself when you're filling out your college applications is to be able to tell a story, to be able to have that application reflect who you are. And that's going to look very different from your friends. So we always get this question like, okay, what are the athletic programs that stand out more in an application? Is it better to be soccer, or is it better to be this? What are the clubs that matter most? And I think I would encourage you to reframe it. And that is, what are the things that I'm passionate about, that I care about? And does my list of activities reflect that? So that when I am talking about myself in my personal statement, in my essays, the reader of that application is going to look and say, well, they're telling me they're passionate about, human rights. And I can see from their list of activities that they've done a lot of volunteer work in this particular area, and that they seem to have taken courses that align with those kinds of interests. So it doesn't matter what activities your friend is in, because your passions and interests are going to be different than your friend. So what we are looking for is not a long list of activities, and there are no activities that stand out more than another. The best applications are those where the students tell me, here are the things I'm interested in. Here is what I have done to actively pursue and develop those interests. Or it might be a student who says, I'm not quite sure exactly what career I'm interested in. So here are the different things I've done to expose myself to a lot of different areas and disciplines to help me find that passion that I'm still searching for. So the applications, again, to me, that stand out the most, it's not the list of activities or the quantity or the type of activity. It's the student who is able to build a narrative around who they really are, what they're seeking, what they hope to accomplish, and what they've done to this point to get themselves there.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, to articulate why they're involved in that and why they're invested in it, I think is really important. So, Zach, I want to turn a little bit to curriculum, because there's some questions that came in around, as you probably know, dual enrollment courses with local community colleges and things like that are increasingly popular. And, there's also AP and IB and students who are potentially earning college credit before college. Is there a drawback to a student who even earns an associate's degree while they're in high school, and how do you look at that when you're looking at a transcript?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I certainly have students who are coming up all the time asking about transfer credit for AP or IB or dual enrollment, or certainly how do we look at it in the process? And to echo what Mike said earlier, there's always the it depends piece. But I think one of the things that every college is looking for are students who are well prepared for our college settings. And that means taking some more rigorous courses. And we would certainly count dual enrollment, AP, IB, honors, however schools might define those as being rigorous courses. Now, in terms of what those things can set you up for, as someone, I took dual enrollment in high school. And it was affordable. It gave me access to a local university library, and I really found it valuable in the work I was doing. But the University of Chicago, we don't accept dual enrollment for transfer credit. In the admissions process, we view it positively. But for those students who are doing dual enrollment, it's still valuable for so many reasons. One is the level of rigor that colleges view, but two, there are a lot of institutions that will accept that. So whether you're earning that associate's in addition to your high school diploma, or you're building out some credits affordably that you might transfer to an institution that does partner with that dual enrollment program, like that's a great option, especially if you're building out that college list. And at the same time, that's something that you have to weigh as you look at the colleges that you may get admitted to, if they may have a policy like we do in Chicago. And the same thing goes for AP and IB curriculum, where you can find schools are pretty straightforward, I believe. We have a chart that's easy to find where you can see exactly what an exam score would transfer for credit, because we do offer AP and IB transfer credit. So it's always helpful. It never hurts. It certainly helps in terms of affordability of college to be able to maybe manage some of those credits. And I think, again, colleges are looking for students who challenge themselves appropriately. And all of those are great ways to do so. And for many students, it's a way to, be well prepared and also potentially earn some credit that's going to be helpful in ensuring they can meet their graduation goals, graduate on time, and all of those sorts of outcomes that we hope our students will have.
And do you look at AP and dual enrollment differently in terms of rigor and that kind of thing?
Great. Yeah, great follow-up. Not necessarily. I think if a student has the ability to do AP and dual enrollment, it's more common for us, at least in my experience, to see that there's some combination therein. And again, we view dual enrollment positively. I'm always giving it positive look in our process in terms of rigor, because I know that student is seeking out something that may really benefit them if they don't end up at my institution. But I generally, especially between those three, I'll never give a major preference, because at the end of the day, I think all of them can prepare students well enough for our environment, and certainly for many colleges. And with the holistic admissions process, it's likely going to be the other factors then that we're going to point to in terms of extracurricular involvement, essays, letters of recommendation, and some of those personal traits that are coming through that'll create that whole picture we're looking for.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that students are wondering a lot about oftentimes. And Mike, another thing that students are wondering, and I get this question a lot, and I imagine you do too, but what makes people unique in college, that college application process? And how important is it to have kind of a unique element in your extracurriculars or in academic interests?
I think that it's, I do get that question a lot. What makes people unique? I think that that every student is different. So every student is unique. I think the issue sometimes is that we have an application process or a system that doesn't allow all of that to come through. Many admission officers are spending 10 to 12 hours a day, sometimes at certain points of the year, reading through applications And, the applications that we use, it's not a perfect system. Ideally, I think those of us that work in admissions, we'd love to really get to know every single applicant. We'd love to sit down and interview with them or check in with them on Zoom and kind of figure out a little bit more about who they are as a student and a citizen outside of the quantitative statistical things that we see in the application. But that's not possible. So the personal statement, I think, is a really great way to help a student stand out and show what's unique about them. And it should be personal, and it should be some kind of statement, at least ideally. There's different applications have different prompts, but really what they're all asking you to do is to write about yourself, just choosing which lens you choose to write about yourself. So I think a really great approach is, and it's easier said than done, but I always tell students to think first before they write, but write the piece that is something that is you're the only one who could write that personal statement. And I think that's one way to stand out. But I also want to make this point, standing out can catch someone's eye when they're reading an application, and it could be a benefit in the process to be unique, but it's not necessary either, right? You don't have to be completely unique or have that uniqueness come through in the application necessarily. I think we're looking for academic achievement. I think we're looking for good citizenship, particularly those of us that are working on behalf of residential colleges. So we're looking for folks that our faculty are going to be excited about working with. We're looking for people that are going to be really great roommates or really great teammates or really good at research or really good at activism. And we don't necessarily need folks to be well-rounded either, because being well-rounded doesn't make one stand out, but people think that they need to be well-rounded. But it's okay if you're what I would call spiky or punky or edgy, or you have a certain talent or something that you really enjoy doing that stands out. That's okay, and that could help us get a well-rounded class at the end of the process, but we don't need every individual to be well-rounded. So, and I think to close it up, authenticity too, just being who you are in the admission process and being the best version of yourself, presenting the best version of yourself in the application, but not trying to alter who you are at the core for what you think the admission office wants to see, because a student doesn't know that. And in many of our offices, the offices are multi-generational and different numbers of years in the experience, and some people might be graduates of the institution. Some people might have other experiences, and some people might be to the left of center, some people to the right of the center, some people are down the middle, all in one office. So you don't really know whose eyes are going to be on the application. But when we go back to that conversation about fit, if you are who you really are, then you just have to sort of trust the process, and the schools will help you find the place that's going to be a good match if you're authentic in your approach. And authenticity is something that will help you stand out to a certain amount anyway.
Yeah, you can't manufacture uniqueness, right?
Yes.
So we're getting to the end of the hour here, and I'm going to end with one question for you all. First, I want to come to one last question from the attendees, but just so you can prepare, the question I'm going to ask you is just kind of one thing you would tell your younger self about, as you were a junior starting out your college search, or maybe just a good nugget of information or advice you would give to these juniors. But Lisa, while the gentlemen are thinking about that, I want to ask you one last question about, different schools. Like, how do you consider the quality of a different high school when you're considering class rank and valedictorian and looking at kind of the context of where that student has gone to school?
Yeah, I think you need to keep in mind the fact that we understand that every school is different, every community is different. So when you hear the term holistic review, comprehensive review, basically what that means is colleges are going to look at where do you go to school? What were the opportunities available to you? Did you take advantage of those opportunities? Were there any particular challenges or hardships, whether it be at home or in your community, that you overcame to be successful in that environment? So I'm not going to compare students who attended two very different kinds of schools the same, because they had different opportunities. One school might offer a lot of opportunities for advanced placement or dual enrollment. Another school might not. So to assume that the academic curriculum and GPAs are going to look identical isn't fair. So we're always looking at a student in the context of what did they have available? How did they take advantage of those opportunities? We're not looking for you to manufacture hardship. If you had a perfectly happy high school experience with a loving family, you are not at a disadvantage. You do not have to have a hardship to get accepted to college. We're just asking you to be honest and explain what your circumstances are, what is your environment, and how did you blossom to the best of your ability within that environment. And trust us that we're fair and that we're taking all of those things into consideration when we're making a decision. So you are not going to be compared against a student, even at your same school, in the same way, because your family circumstances might be different. So it's very individualized review. It really, truly is.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to make. And I think we'll do the lightning round here, and we'll go Mike, and then Zach, and then Lisa. So, Mike, you want to start us off?
I will start off with a little bit of advice. For digitally native generations, there's a lot of great information out there about the college search process and lots of other things. And it's great that you're all tuned in to this panel, and there's lots of other great resources. But I think everybody should start, students I'm talking to, start by asking yourself some questions. It should be a process that starts looking inward. And so some of those questions: why am I going to college? And not just, will I go to a high school with a college-bound culture and that's what we do, but what are your own personal motivations for wanting to do this, whether they be academic or intellectual, or wanting to move to a different part of the country or a different country. But ask yourself, why are you engaging with the process? What are you looking to get out of the process? I think those are two good questions to start with. There may be more, but take some time to get to know yourself a little bit. And then that's going to help guide you when you have those answers. That's going to guide you to places that are going to be a really good fit. And keep in mind that there are many, many places that will provide you with a really enjoyable and transformative experience. Not one, not two, not three, not five, but many, many. So you just have to do a lot of work on the front end to find them. And I think that hard work starts by looking inward, and then you could go outward to seek those great sources of information to help you along your journey.
Thanks. Yeah, set that foundation. All right, Zach.
To tag off at the end of what Mike said about the many institutions that be a great fit. If I was giving advice to myself as a junior, I think I would tell myself to cast a wider net in terms of what potential places could be on my list. I don't mean apply to a bunch of schools. I mean, make sure that I wish I would have maybe gone out a little farther in terms of what I was looking at. So cast that wide net in terms of that initial research. But the piece of advice I have is, college can get stressful. We talked about it earlier. Another piece here is, find one night of the week that's the talk about college night, if you're talking about it with your family, so that it's not something that's kind of always jumping into conversations. You get tired of it after a while. Enjoy the process. It can be the journey, I should say. And yeah, one night a week, and that'll help you stay organized and make sure that college doesn't just dominate every part of your junior and senior year.
Perfect. Yes, be a high school student. Mm-hmm. All right, Lisa, bring us home.
Yeah, I loved Zach's answer. I would say pursue happiness. Pursue happiness. And I say this because you can be at the highest ranked university in the world. If you're not happy there, you're not going to do well academically. Because if you think about how you are when you're happy, you challenge yourself, you take educated risks, you go out and meet new people, you try new things. So allow yourself to pursue happiness in an environment where I use that word blossom a lot, where you're going to blossom. If you choose a school just because it's highly ranked and you're not happy there, you will not blossom in the way that you had hoped. So pursue happiness.
Well, what a wonderful way to end things. Really appreciate all the wisdom you shared this evening, and appreciate all that you do. We will have another session kind of kickoff around affordability. We talked a little bit about financial fit tonight, and we'll have a session next Thursday night about our kind of an affordability kickoff. So we hope you'll join us then, and we will have many of these to come in the coming months, and we hope you'll join us. So thanks again, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you for watching the Class of 2024 College Kickoff from College Guidance Network. We'd love to get your feedback about this episode in a brief survey. By filling out the survey, you'll have the chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card. All students and their families should have access to trusted, high-quality college and career information. That's what CGN School offers. CGN School is the first video library for counselors to build capacity with their families, featuring only nationally recognized college and career experts. Content is organized into multiple curated formats, including our new 18-month roadmap to college, delivering you the insight and tips you need when you need them. We've dropped a link to a brief video in the chat. See and hear directly from counselors who are now letting good content do more of the work. Go to collegeguidancenetwork.com to request a demo. Our kickoff programming continues next Thursday with College Costs, making sense of it all. This show will prepare you to have the money talk as a family and help you understand the resources available to make college more affordable. And on February 9th, we're going to explore ChatGPT, AI, and the impact they're having on careers for the future. Tonight's episode will be posted to share with your friends and colleagues later this week with caption translations in several languages. Thanks again for joining us, and good night from College Guidance Network.